Peacekeeping and humanitarian companies have spent over $1.2 billion fighting militias and disease alike, in the hope that East Timor's people would one day have peace. The flames of war have simmered at East Timor's borders ever since World War II, where it was originally occupied by Imperial Japan until their defeat in the war. After 3 years of occupation, Portugal swiftly took over, starting the spark of war that inadvertently would continue to be fueled until today. East Timor first declared independence in 1975, but this was short-lived. Just 9 days later, Indonesian forces invaded and took over colonial rule. The blaze of conflict quickly spread throughout the country, starting a 24-year campaign of pacification, bringing with it an estimated 102,000 conflict-related deaths, 84,000 of which were caused by hunger and disease. Finally, in June 1999, the United Nations mission in East Timor was dispatched as primarily a political mission, with a mandate to ascertain whether the majority of East Timorese wanted autonomy from Indonesia. UNAMET was stationed to help monitor a fair ballot for the East Timorese people to participate in. The overwhelming response by the Timorese was support for independence, but like most wars, the flames had scorched deep into the minds of both opposing sides, and the UN knew hostilities were still simmering under the hastily made political patches. This was proven correct as following the referendum, militias supported by the Indonesian military commenced a punitive scorched earth campaign. This well-organized militia killed approximately 1,400 Timorese and turned 300,000 into refugees, fleeing into West Timor. Australia stepped up outside of UN command and led an international force into East Timor, with the task to restore peace and security and protect UNAMET, who was left vulnerable and defenseless without a Chapter 7 mandate to use force. But this force was swiftly replaced by United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor in October, just 1 month since Interfet's inception. By Resolution 1272, UNTAID was an integrated multi-dimensional peacekeeping operation, fully responsible for the administration of East Timor during its transition to independence. During the first 6 months of 2000, more than 167,000 refugees returned back to their homes in East Timor, but still up to 120,000 remained in camps in West Timor. But yet again, the spark of war ignited armed attacks against these camps and UN officials. The United Nations Security Council responded to the deteriorating security situation by adopting Resolution 1319, which called to the Indonesian government to disarm the militia and expand its feeble police force. On the 14th of April 2002, Ixana Gusmao was appointed President-elect of East Timor as a major step in the transition to independence. And finally, on May 20th, East Timor became an internationally recognized independent state, and UNTAID came to an end. That very same day, the United Nations Missions of Support to East Timor was established with the mandate to provide assistance to core administrative structures critical to the viability and political stability of East Timor. UNMISET was yet another peacekeeping mission to help the now independent nation attain self-sufficiency. UNMISET was the third consecutive UN mission to remain in East Timor for 3 years, getting replaced by the United Nations Office in East Timor, UNOTIL. This mission had its mandate extended due to political, humanitarian, and security crises, which ultimately led to the establishment of UNMIT, the United Nations Integrated Mission in East Timor. This is the first multi-dimensional, integrated mission the UN commissioned to remain in East Timor on a long-term basis, currently having been there for 5 years. Now, East Timor's path to independence, though rocky and convoluted, is counted as a success within the international community. East Timor has become a viable case study where independence successfully ended an ethnic and civil war. The UN missions before UNMIT did successfully help East Timor towards independence and fulfill their mandates in that capacity, but could it have been done in a quicker, more organized fashion? In Resolution 1704, UNMIT was given the mandate to support East Timor in the 2007 presidential election. With the UN having such an involved and integrated history with East Timor, it gave them the ability to successfully address the problems occurring in East Timor's democracy. The UN showed its ability to, firstly, act with long-term motivations, not just initially stopping the conflict, but addressing the Timorese desire for independence, creating lasting peace. Secondly, they allowed for mandate changes as the conflict continually switched from the need for political mitigation to a peacekeeping force and then finally to a multidimensional peace operation. The UN effectively extended UNITIL for 3 months and adequately responded to East Timor's request for increased police and military assistance when UNMIT was deployed. But like most UN operations, this has been riddled with faults and improvements can be made. The most obvious cause for confusion would be the numerous operations that were deployed. If the UN could have secured a long-term operation force with the capacity to remain in East Timor without constantly switching operation leaders, the transition to independence could have been more fluid and smooth. Although, of course, this is highly unlikely to occur, as countries are not willing to send troops away for extended periods of time. Also, all mandates provided reference to the need to establish Timor's police force, yet it wasn't until UNIMET that this was properly executed. Perhaps stability would have been easier to occur if the UN had focused more of its efforts on building Timor's capacity to defend itself instead of doing it for them. Another problem with East Timor is the thousands of refugees that are now returning back to their homes after the war. This massive rise in population is causing strain on resources, housing, and the new government. UNMIT is still currently in East Timor helping to deal with the struggling nation's problems, such as these, and also including poverty, the lacking justice system, and a huge generation gap. After independence, the UN was given 2 years to quickly try and establish an entire nation, but made a whole lot of wrong development choices, which have now resulted in mass unemployment and East Timor being one of the poorest countries in the world. In this way, stabilizing peace and ensuring development become intertwined. But in this case study of East Timor, it has shown the UN to have acted appropriately and effectively to fulfill their mandates, which should always be their primary objective.